Freak shows were traveling carnivals of people with physical disabilities and abnormalities. They would traverse the country, usually under an exploitative ringmaster, as acts for people to gawk and marvel at. Typical performers in a freak show would include a bearded lady, conjoined twins, dwarves, heavily tattooed or pierced individuals, or anyone with an excess of body hair or deformed features. These acts and shows were a popular form of entertainment across Europe from the 1500s to the 1950s. The fascination dates back to the medieval courts, where kings and queens would often use dwarves, conjoined twins, or other people with physical abnormalities as entertainment pieces for their own amusement or for royal guests. Although freak shows seem cruel and exploitative in today's eyes, a lot of performers were paid surprisingly well, and the performances gave them a chance to work and make money where otherwise they would not have been able to. In its heyday, it was seen as a respectable career that often provided a healthy salary. The flip side of this, of course, is that the people involved endured public disdain and scrutiny, and often worked horrendously long hours under harsh conditions and unsympathetic masters. Frank Lentini, the three-legged man, was quoted saying, "My limb does not bother me as much as the curious, critical gaze." Popularity of freak shows reached its peak in the 1840s through to 1940s, becoming commercially run, successful enterprises, with acts joining together under one banner or person to create freak shows. One of the most famous freak shows of all time was created by American P.T. Barnum in the 1800s, which in 2017 inspired the popular film The Greatest Showman. The Greatest Showman is aptly named because freak shows needed a salesman, or showman, to draw the masses to their performances. One of the most common ways to advertise a show was to literally call people to you.
Roll up, feast your eyes upon the amazing, the fantastic, the strange.
With as many adjectives as they could stuff into a sentence, a ringmaster would promise shock and delight as you got to experience hitherto unseen attractions. They would hand out pamphlets and stick up flyers, encouraging everyone to come and see their show. The shows could be anything from a typical walk-through museum exhibit layout to a full circus performance. For example, P.T. Barnum created Barnum's American Museum on Broadway, which consisted of a mixture of freak show acts and other attractions, such as unusual or exotic animals, both living and stuffed, detailed models of cities or battles, and daily hot air balloon rides across the city. But P.T. Barnum's show was comprised of as many hoax acts as it was legitimate. One of his most famous hoaxes was the Fiji mermaid, which he introduced to his museum in 1842. The Fiji mermaid was the top half of a juvenile monkey sewn into the bottom half of a fish, to look like a half-monkey, half-fish version of a mermaid. Another, more horrifying one was Barnum's purchase of a blind and almost completely paralyzed elderly African-American woman named Joyce Heth, who he then claimed was 161 years old and George Washington's former nurse. Despite slavery being illegal in New York at the time, Barnum found a loophole that allowed him to lease Heth for a year, during which he forced her to work 10 to 12-hour days. She died a year later at the real age of 80. After her death, Barnum exploited Heth one last time, charging people to watch as he performed a live autopsy on her body, revealing his hoax and her true age. Other famous acts in Barnum's circus included Annie Jones, the bearded lady, Chang and Eng Bunker, known as the Siamese twins, Jojo, the dog-faced boy, Isaac Scrooge, the human skeleton, and Lionel, the lion-faced man. Despite his horrifying actions and exploitation of vulnerable people, Barnum's museum career was highly successful. His museum spanned over 25 years, from 1841 through to 1868, when a fire burnt it to the ground for the second time in 3 years, leaving him unable to recoup his losses sufficiently enough to reopen. Instead, in 1870, aged 60 years old, he opened his first traveling circus, taking his attractions on the road, including his most famous and longest-running act, General Tom Thumb. General Tom Thumb is one of, if not the most famous freak show act in history. Found at 4 years old by P.T. Barnum, Tom Thumb, whose real name was Charles Sherwood Stratton, stood at only 2 feet 1 inch tall. It isn't known what caused Stratton's small size, but he attracted plenty of attention and curiosity that helped launch Barnum's international show career. Despite Barnum's somewhat checkered relationship with his performers, he and Stratton had a great and long-running friendship. Barnum gave Stratton the stage name of General Tom Thumb and taught him how to sing, dance, act, and mime. Together, they not only showcased Stratton as a freak act, but as a freak act with extraordinary talent. They spent almost all of Stratton's life together, changing the American perception of freak show performers from unfavorable carnival side acts to one of the most popular forms of 1800s entertainment. Stratton became a phenomenon, the most famous actor and celebrity of his era. His name was well known across Europe and America, and he even met Queen Victoria twice. Stratton later married, and through Barnum's salary, became a wealthy man, owning his own house and yacht. Later in life, he and Barnum actually became partners before Stratton tragically and unexpectedly died of a stroke at just 45 years old. In the same era and across the pond from American Barnum, a Victorian counterpart rose to fame in the world of freak shows, a man named Tom Norman. Tom Norman began his career featuring an electric lady who allegedly shocked those she touched. Like Barnum, Norman was not above hoaxes. Later, his traveling exhibitions featured the Skeleton Woman, Eliza Jenkins, white men painted black who spoke in a made-up language and were portrayed as Zulu savages, a dwarf family which consisted of 2 men with dwarfism and a borrowed baby, and a woman who bit off the heads of live rats. Move over, Ozzy Osbourne. Norman's most famous act, however, was Joseph Merrick, named the Elephant Man because of his severe physical deformities. Merrick toured with Norman for a few weeks during the late 1880s, but public opinion towards freak shows was beginning to turn. Now viewed as distasteful, it wasn't long before police shut their show down and the 2 men parted ways. The previous notion that the disabilities showcased in freak shows were something to be feared or disturbed by was disabused by modern medical advancement that explained the causes of these deformities were genetic mutations or diseases. Soon, public opinion became sympathetic, and throughout the 1900s, people began to believe it was wrong to exploit others this way. Today, the freak show concept is a thing of the past, and we understand how wrong it is, and was, to exploit or derive entertainment from others based on a disability they have or how they look.